Let's talk to James Hill from The Spectator. James, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
I mean, quite extraordinary how angry people are about this. I've been saying this morning that the last time I saw people as angry as this, in fact, probably not quite as angry as this, was when the pensioners' winter fuel allowance was taken away by Keir Starmer. It does appear to be a complete misstep by Starmer, and I know that there will be people who are happy about it. There will be people who voted to remain who will be happy, but he has done what he said he wouldn't do, which is to bring back all of those old arguments and all of those old schisms in our society that supposedly sensible people said we shouldn't have anymore.
And crucially, of course, sign a deal that hurts the fishing industry.
Yeah.
Pretty much all there says that everything, the expectation among a lot of officials and commentators was for a 4-year deal on fishing. Instead, it's a 12-year deal. What that means, of course, is that a lot of the older people involved in fishing, the fishermen, will retire, and the young ones simply won't come in, and therefore you really risk the loss of a historic British industry. Yeah. I mean, The Economist has a political rule which is never go to war with a profession that was depicted in a children's picture book. First, Labour did it with the farmers, now they're doing it with the fishermen. It seems to be a bit of a habit, going after highly visible, highly emotive industries that, while they may not in Treasury thinking contribute a huge amount to the economy, are actually hugely symbolic to the people of the country. And I think you can see that in polling. You know, the Good Growth Foundation, which is the Labour-aligned think tank, they showed that fishing is one of the things that people really care about. Even though people aren't involved with the fishing industry directly, they very much care about the future of their fishermen.
Yeah, absolutely right. And we were speaking to a fisherman earlier who was saying to us that, you know, because we were coming to the end, effectively, of a sort of transition period, there were a lot of younger people who were hoping to get into the fishing business, and certainly down in Cornwall, Steve Baker was telling me, where his constituency was, that there was whole villages which had been sort of decimated by the lack of the ability to fish, but they were hopeful that with the end of this transition period, they could start doing the business again. And that's now been completely taken away from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you know, Labour was very keen before the election to talk about the left behind, sort of the communities that were forgotten. I remember Lisa Nandy doing a huge campaign on coastal communities and an attempt to win coastal seats. And now, of course, it's sadly that the only people sort of sailing in English waters right now are going to be the small boats crossing the channel.
Well, somebody said that to me. You know, when Keir Starmer said he was going to stop the boats, we didn't know it was going to be the fishing boats he was going to stop. But, you know, you can use that line anytime you like. But let's talk about what exactly happens next, because, again, a bit like the American deal, a bit like the India deal, you know, it makes a good press conference if you like that sort of thing. But there's an awful lot of detail that hasn't really come out.
Yeah, a huge amount that still needs to be worked out. I mean, the reference on food standards talks about a contribution cost. How much is that going to be over what timescale? We've also got a huge amount of sort of talking still to be done. I mean, the most exciting thing on defence, and I thought defence was potentially one of the big wins for this government, was going to be about if the UK can access the EU 150 billion European Defence Fund. Well, there's going to actually be a new mechanism set up for further talks in the future. So it seems to be more talking shops.
Yes.
A bad deal for fishers, unfortunately.
Exactly right. And the amount of money that we're going to have to put into the European Union is not that clear, but it seems like an awful lot more than we've got.
Yeah, and I think that what's really striking about this deal is that, you know, there's a huge amount of political capital that's going to be spent on it. And yet, actually, I think the most bullish government statistics we've seen thus far gives them a sort of 0.3% GDP improvement. I mean, you know, frankly, that's not going to pay for much of Labour's massive spend on, for instance, GB Energy or net zero commitments, etc. Yeah. So I really don't think that it's going to be the win that a lot of the Labour people are out there, as Priti Patel was there saying, popping champagne corks, etc.
Well, like everything they've done in the 10 months they've been in, they haven't quite got it right, have they? I mean, there's always been something slightly wrong with it. You know, it's always been announced with a great fanfare. I mean, look at Rachel Reeves's budget is now a complete dud. You know, the announcement of GB Energy and the GB Energy bill, which was supposed to be a sort of a magnet for investment from firms, it now turns out to be the complete opposite. They've just given 600 million quid to the owners of Scottish Power, who are a massive energy company, who were supposed to be coming in with the other way with the money. You know, the same as the Stop the Boats campaign, you know, didn't work. You know, the education campaign, putting VAT on schools, it resulted in 13,000 kids leaving private school and coming back into the state system. They predicted 3,000. You know, their jobs plan is not going to provide 2 million jobs, it's going to provide about 100,000 jobs. You know, everything that they say is going to be a great idea basically isn't.
Do you know what, you're so spot on about that point about learning on the job. You know, you bring someone into a job, you want them to have learnt their craft and be able to fix the improvements you've signed them up for and paid them a handsome amount. Labour have a really bad track record, unfortunately, of coming into office and learning on the job. You know, Rachel Reeves was warned about the nom-doms, she was warned about private school tax. She was warned about, the inheritance tax, the reason why successive ministers haven't done it the past 10 years.
Yeah.
All these different policies, and unfortunately, it's going to be Britain who ends up paying the price for that.
Yeah, exactly right. Let's talk about what you just were tweeting about earlier on in the hour, about this new poll which shows the Tories in 4th place. I put it to Priti Patel that they've got a lot of work to do. I think her answer was reasonably gracious. But they're in a bad place here, aren't they?
Massively, and she was talking about 1997. Of course, she would say that, but unfortunately, the Tories are in a lot worse place than 1997. Back then, of course, they made gains at the following local elections.
Yeah.
They were still polling clearly as the second party in sort of 30-35%. Right now, they're closer to 15-16%, 4th place behind the Liberal Democrats, Reform and Labour as well. They're only 6 points off the Greens, and I've already had one text from a sitting Tory MP this morning saying, it's not so much renewal as resuscitation. Really, really lots of downbeat Conservatives right now ahead of later today. There's going to be a shadow cabinet meeting, and all this, of course, at the same time that Boris Johnson is re-emerging. So it just makes, I think, Kemi Badenoch look like she's failing to do the job properly or cutting through. Yeah,
well, that's it. And you've also said that a lot of Tory members are split as to whether or not she will be their leader at the next election. I don't think she will.
I think that the big sense in the party right now, particularly in Parliament, is 12 months. They've had this massive hit of the local elections, doing a lot worse than any of them thought. Next year, there's Wales and Scotland. If they come 4th there, lose more seats, go backward. She's not sort of holding the line on 23%, which is what Rishi got last year. It's actually going down to sort of, 15-17%. So I think this next 12 months could be the make or break period for Kemi Badenoch.
And there are others, of course, who think this could be the best thing that's ever happened to reform. Just when you didn't want to turbocharge Nigel Farage's, engines, here we go.
On Brexit, yes, certainly. I think that it was quite striking just how much he was the one making the political weather on this. And I think that, it's going to be something that we see more of because, as I say, this is not the end. Everyone keeps thinking of these things like the Windsor Framework, right. They never are. This is the first of a series of summits, perpetual rolling summits and negotiation. And the danger is, of course, every time Labour signs up to something that people don't want in this country, Nigel Farage will be able to stand there and say, betrayal, betrayal, betrayal. So I think that it's going to be a narrative that we see over the next 4 years. But Nigel is also very keen to emphasise that I think he's moved on from the Brexit years in some sense. He's got a lot bigger. He's not just talking about Europe now, he's talking about other things. So the Brexit thing will be one element, an important element in his armoury, but not the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. James, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. James Hill, Deputy Political Editor at The Spectator.